Greetings and welcome to the channel. What is the lost decade, and what if we're at the beginning of a new one? How did the lost decade impact retirement savings? I have a couple scenarios that will hopefully show the downsides and benefits of the lost decade. 2000 to 2009 is often referred to as the lost decade because of this. You may be wondering what this is. It's the S&P 500 chart from the beginning of 2000 to the end of 2009. Here's a chart with the annual return, including dividends, of the S&P 500 from 2000 through 2009. You'll notice at the beginning, the first 3 years were all negative, at negative 9.1%, negative 11.9%, negative 22.1%. So at that point, we were already down pretty far. It would take a lot to recover. But when we get down to 2008, we had another bad year because of the housing market crash. If you want to know more about that, and an interesting and entertaining way to learn about it is to watch The Big Short, which I highly recommend. Anyway, by the end of 2009, the overall return for the decade is actually negative. In this chart, I've added the cumulative return, which you can see by the end of 2009, negative 9.12%. Again, this is including dividends for the first decade of this century. To show this another way, I decided to look at what if we invested $100 at the beginning of 2000. You'll see by the end of 2009, we would have $90.88. And there were only 2 years during this whole period when we would have actually had more than $100. And that's 2006 and 2007, because we had a couple decent years leading up to that. Nobody can predict the future, but some feel that we may be entering a challenging market with an unknown time frame. If tariffs are intended to bring manufacturing back to the U.S., it will take years and could negatively affect the overall stock market in the short to medium term. If it doesn't work, the result could be the same in the short and medium term, which I'm thinking up 5 to 6 years as being medium term. The first few years of the lost decade were challenging. And to be clear, I am not predicting another lost decade, but what if we entered another one? What if during the lost decade we invested $2,000 a year at the beginning of each year, kind of like what we might have done if we had an IRA? You can see at the end of the 10 years, obviously we've invested $20,000, and we're actually up slightly at $21,055. This is a result of dollar cost averaging. We were able to purchase more of the S&P at lower prices in the years when it was down. Then when it recovered, we actually purchased a little bit less. But overall, because of the ups and downs, we've smoothed out our investment, again, due to dollar cost averaging, which means instead of being down, if we'd have put the whole $20,000 in at the beginning of 2000, we're actually slightly up by $1,000. Because the market has been pretty amazing since that time period, by the end of 2024, with nothing else invested, our account would be up to $147,962. I wanted to see what the difference would be if we swapped the lost decade and the following decade, which performed much better. As you can see, by the end of 2024, with no other changes other than swapping the returns, we end up with about half of the value of our other investment at $78,264. And here's a chart comparing the two values. The red is the actual return we would have gotten, and the blue is if we had switched the 2 decades. And you can see we have almost $150,000 in our real world scenario and only $78,000 in our fictional scenario, which fortunately is not the case. I have 2 conclusions. Dollar cost averaging does work, and needing to draw down during a period like the lost decade could be devastating due to sequence of return risk. And through this, I've kind of decided that dollar cost averaging and sequence of return risk, not that they're opposites, they are related, but dollar cost averaging is on the investing side of it. Sequence of return risk is on the withdrawal side. but they give you similar and related issues because the market doesn't have a set return every year. If you're investing in the S&P 500, some years you're going to be up, some years you're going to be down. Keep in mind, in a down year, you need to make more of a percentage. If it's 50% down, the following year, you need 100% return to get back to zero. But that's one of the downsides, I could say, of compound interest. If we are entering a new lost decade, I don't think it's going to work out well for me because I'm going to start needing that money within the next decade. My retirement account. So I've got to start looking ahead. Not that I can predict the future, obviously, but what kinds of things can I do to prepare? Obviously, as I get closer to retirement, money should be shifting from stocks into either bonds or cash to make up for the volatility that's in the market. But how much? No idea. Anyway, as always, if you have comments or questions, leave those in below. And remember, if you're going to retire, retire to something.